Can you all hear me okay? Fine? Yep. Cool. So my name is Mehul Revankar. I'm the Director of Product Management here at SaltStack, and I'm joined by Daniel Wozniak, our Principal Engineer for Salt. He's one of our core open engineers. Thank you for taking the time to come to this session. I know you could be doing a million different things, but yet you chose to come here. I don't know why, but hopefully it should be fun and interesting. We'll be talking about SaltStack Horizons and specifically around the features and um, innovations that are coming up, both from the enterprise world and Salt Open over the next 6 to 12 months, and even 3 months from here on. But before I set the stage on some of the things that we are doing, I want to talk about what we are doing. Why do we exist? What's our mission, and so on. And our mission, to put it very simply, is to manage and secure any system at any scale for any OS, for any team. That's a very broad vision, but this is something that drives us every day. So when we come back to work, this is the thing we're trying to do, and it helps. The work that we do at SaltStack helps us fulfill this mission. And we do that with Salt Open, obviously. So when we say any system, your systems could be in the cloud, they could be containers, they could be network devices, a hybrid data center. We don't care as long as there is a system that Salt can manage. We want to manage it, and we want to secure it, and we want to scale infinitely horizontally. As we have had a few customers have gone up to 400,000 minions, and have scaled just fine without many challenges. And when you say any OS, all the major operating systems you would typically run into, you want to manage them as well. Salt is obviously supported on all the major Unix operating systems. We are supported on Windows. We probably have a distribution for Raspberry Pi. We can manage network devices and so on and so forth. So if you have Cisco iOS, we can manage that. Juno OS, it doesn't matter. So any OS is supported. And all the work that we do here is eventually helping all the teams that typically use Salt. We started off in the IT ops and the DevOps community. We got a lot of traction there. And now what we are seeing is that we are getting into some of the different domains, such as SecOps and NetOps as well. So all the work we do here helps all this initiative. And the bedrock of our foundation is obviously the Salt Open project. We invest quite a bit in maintaining the project, supporting the project, making sure all the things that come out of our releases are accurate and scale and so on, except for the 2.1 release. But we try our best to make sure that when you download Salt, you have a very stable environment you can work with, and it works for you. And on top of that, we build our SaltStack enterprise portfolio of products. And when we look at enterprise, it's a very fine balance in what we do in the enterprise and how it benefits the open community, and how some of the work that comes in the open community benefits the enterprise portfolio of products. And the best way to look at this is, it's a very symbiotic relationship where the work that happens in the enterprise side of things, we invest quite a bit in making sure that the minions scale well, we test them, and so on. And the work that comes out from the open team then also helps some of the enterprise products as well. So, a simple example could be Salt in Windows. We invest quite a bit of research and investment to make sure all the LGPO modules are up to snuff. They can configure, they can manage all the settings that all the new Windows operating systems can support, for example, 2019 and so on. So the Salt, Open, and Enterprise is a very symbiotic relationship. Open helps Enterprise, Enterprise helps Open. So with that, I want to segue into our enterprise suite of products. About a year and a half ago, we made, Salt. Salt is such a massively successful project. It becomes difficult for us to focus. What do we focus on? Because there are some users who have managed medical devices with Salt. That doesn't mean that it makes sense for us to chase down the medical community for Salt, right? So about a year and a half ago, we made a decision to focus on 3 core areas: IT ops, security operations, and network operations. And what I'm going to demonstrate uh, now in the next few minutes is the upcoming features for our enterprise portfolio. So with investments in the Salt Open community, we're also obviously investing in our enterprise community. And one of the first things we are doing with Salt going forward is our goal is to have a 90-day release schedule. Right? That means our releases will be quicker. They'll have more user-centric features, and you'll get more value from the product pretty quickly. Something that we did at around RSA timeframe is we announced our SecOps portfolio of products. We came out with SecOps Compliance, which allows you to do secure configuration management. And today we announced our SecOps Protect, SaltStack Protect module, which allows you to manage vulnerabilities. So you not only can assess vulnerabilities across all the systems that we can manage, typically starting out with Unix, we can also remediate these vulnerabilities with SaltStack Protect. And when we were building this solution, the common theme was, the sec and ops community, they don't work together really well. So, so for example, the typical way of things is the security team, they would run scans, they would create reports, PDF, Excel sheets, and whatnot, and find hundreds of thousands of vulnerabilities, and then they will lob off the Excel sheet over to the ops team. Hey guys, go fix it, right? And the ops guy is figuring out, how do I fix these things? Because not all the times they know how to fix these things. I mean, maybe they have to write manual scripts, maybe they have to write PowerShell scripts and whatnot. So we spoke to a lot of customers as part of the development process, and we asked them, what is it that you want us to do? And they said, if we could just make this process a bit simpler for us, that would make our lives so much easier. So that's what we are doing with our first integration with SaltStack Protect. What this does is it imports data directly from a vulnerability management vendor like Tenable, and you can run a scan with Tenable and import the scan result into SaltStack Protect, and we will help you remediate that from SaltStack. So you don't have to figure out, parse out Excel sheets, PDF files, or whatever it is. All the reports just come in, and once they come in, you can start remediation. So let's run the demo. In the interest of time, I recorded this demo before the session. So I'll start off with this. So I started off with Tenable here. So this is the Tenable product. You would typically come in and create a scan. So let's create a scan here. Give it, let's select an IP address that you want to manage. So for example, maybe you're scanning your CentOS system. So in this case, the CentOS system is, I believe this one. So let's copy that IP address into our into Tenable and run a scan. We'll have to give some credentials, obviously. So let's put in some SSH credentials here. So since we are not logging in as root, let's give sudo privileges as well. And then save the policy. Now you have to save the policy, and imagine a scenario where you would create your target group where you want to scan with Tenable, and then the target group sync up between SaltStack Enterprise or SaltStack Protect and Tenable. So now let's go ahead and run the scan. So Tenable would go ahead and run a scan. And now the scan is completed, and now we found, there are all these critical or high or medium severity vulnerabilities that exist on that system. So typically at this point, what happens is, the security engineer, he typically exports this into a PDF file or an Excel sheet and hands it off. But here, what you can do now is you can export this result into a .nessus or export the scan result in the nessus format. So now it's exported. So let's import this result into SaltStack Protect. And as I say this, keep in mind, this is our MVP for the first release of the product. Eventually, you'll see as we go finer. So I talked about 90-day release schedule. So as we go further into the releases, this step would also be not required. So you'll come into the product, you would configure your API credentials or so on, and SaltStack will just grab the scan results directly from Tenable without even having to export. So we'll emulate that part as well. But this is a functional version of what is coming up in the 6.2 version of the product. So now what I'll do, I'll create a target group that you scan with Tenable. And one thing to note here, the way we design SaltStack Protect is an add-on to SaltStack Enterprise. And so everything that you do in SaltStack Enterprise becomes available in SaltStack Protect. So the target groups that you just created is now directly available in SaltStack Protect. And you save. And now let's go ahead and import the policy. So we have the scan result, and go. So when you import the scan result, we'll provide you with some analysis. Obviously, Tenable has been in the industry for 20 years, and they have support for maybe 100,000 vulnerabilities. Since they have been doing this for maybe 20 years, right? So as we start off with Tenable, with SaltStack Protect, we have support for a good majority of the Unix operating systems that are out there. So when we import the data, we know how to remediate some of these vulnerabilities. So what you'll see here is when we imported it, SaltStack Protect did the analysis, and it told us that of all these vulnerabilities, there are 12 vulnerabilities we can remediate with SaltStack Protect, and there are no advisories that did not match. So we can essentially fix everything that was reported by Tenable. So let's go ahead and import all the supported vulnerabilities. Great. So all the vulnerabilities are now imported, and you can start to remediate. So typically, you would go in and select the highs and criticals. And what we have heard from our customers is that we just fix the criticals and the highs, and the mediums are on as-is basis. Whenever we have time, we'll figure it out. But for the first time, we just want to focus on the criticals and the high. And as we are going through this solution, keep in mind this is an API-first solution. So all the operations that are happening in the UI are you can do all of this from the API as well. So let's go ahead and select all the highs and the criticals. And if you're curious how the SaltStack Protect functionality works, I have a demo after this session, so please join me there. So we'll demo the Protect functionality there as well. So this is a step ahead of Protect, so this is what is coming in Protect in the future releases. But if you want to understand what Protect does, you should join the next session. Okay, so we can now kick off and then remediate. So it's going to do its job and come back. So let's wait for a few minutes. Okay, so the scan completed. Now it's time for you to see if it was fixed or not, right? So let's go ahead and run a scan. So you remember there were two highs there. Hopefully when you run a scan again, those should not come back. This demo cannot go wrong. You guys realize that, right? Okay, great. So the scan finished, and notice all the high vulnerabilities are now remediated. You can now go back into SaltStack Protect and see what SaltStack has done as well. So you can look into this minion and then dive deeper into the remediation work SaltStack has done. So for example, in this case, we went ahead and updated some packages for you based on what was asked for us to remediate. So that's the first feature we wanted to demo. We have quite a few to go over. So let's get into the next part of the presentation. So So that's the tenable import functionality that is coming into SaltStack Enterprise 6.2, which is targeted for early Q1 of next year. So it should be coming out. If you're willing to try this out, there is a survey link we'll provide towards the end of this session where you can just sign up and we'll give you the pre-release builds of this product. So to start play around with it. So the next up I want to talk about SAML. So when we started working on SaltStack Enterprise maybe 2 or 3 years ago, we realized this was a critical feature that was requested. But as we were invited, thanks to our SaltStack SecOps portfolio of products, into more environments, larger environments, one of the pain points that our customers highlighted is, we don't want to use your internal user management stuff. We have our Google Okta ping configured already. If we just want to use SAML, we just want you to integrate with that, and that should be it. We don't want to create users into your platform and so on and so forth. And there were some customers who told us, we cannot procure a solution until you have SAML or OIDC integration in place. So SaltStack Enterprise 6.2 will support SAML and OIDC authentication mechanisms. So all the major providers that are out there, so Google, Ping, Okta, it would just work just fine. So let's demo that functionality. Well, So the way you would configure SAML in SaltStack Enterprise 6.2, you would configure the YAML configuration, the endpoints and whatnot. So you have I'll walk through a Google example. So in this case, we gave it a name, give it the endpoints, the entity ID, and so on. So this would you would configure the YAML configuration for the vendor you want to integrate with. And then you would load up this file. So there's a command that will load up this file. Paul was much faster when I was recording this video. I don't know why this is so slow now. Okay, so once you load it up, the SAML integration will show up in the UI. This is super slow. I don't know why. So once you have the integration configured, let's go ahead and log in. So already have Paul Bailey as the account you want to log in with. Slow this down. So notice this user doesn't have any privileges yet. So we just created an account, logged in, there are no privileges. Let's give this user an admin privileges. So this user now has access to the Empire here. And now that the user has access to the minions, you could now run jobs with it. So it's very simple. Once you have all your endpoints configured for whichever vendor you have, Google, Ping, Okta, the process will essentially work the same. And if there is something that if there is a vendor that you don't see supported in the product, let us know, and we'll add support for that endpoint as well. We use standard libraries for the SAML support, and most of the vendors are supported. And if there is a vendor that is not supported, let us know, and we'll add support for it. So this is just essentially going through the job and ensuring the user was able to run the job, and you can now see the results as well. So that's the SAML integration. So when we were building our SaltStack SecOps portfolio of products, one of the promises we made to our customers is this is not only for operating systems. Anything and everything that SaltStack can manage, we will run SaltStack SecOps with it. Right? So one aspect of that I want to demonstrate today is our ability to manage SQL databases as well. So in SaltStack SecOps 6.1, the product that we announced today, we supported or we added functionality to create custom content for your own organization. So you can write your own content, bring that into SaltStack SecOps, and run assessments and remediations with it. So what that means is now you're freed up to write your own salt state files, run them through our SDK, and then create the content, bring that into the product, and run assessments and remediations. So we now have support for, we started adding support for SQL databases because that's where most of our customers came in. Can you help us with MySQL? Can you help us with Oracle 12c, Postgres, and so on? And SaltStack has been pretty proficient in managing database. So we leverage that functionality to support SQL databases here as well. And if SaltStack SecOps is new to you, again, feel free to join the session in about after this session, and I'll walk you through the demo for SaltStack SecOps Comply. So this is the typical SaltStack SecOps file. There are two parts to it. One is a meta file where you describe what that check is, the name, description, operating systems, and so on. And it also has a corresponding salt state file. Once you have the salt state file and meta file created, you would run the SDK. Let me just go back and explain what just happened. Yeah, so this is the SDK we shipped with SaltStack's Enterprise 6.1, so you can create your own content, and then once you run the script, it creates it's a zip file, and the zip file is essentially formatted in a way SaltStack Enterprise can understand. So now that you have created this zip file, you would come into the product and upload the zip file that the SDK just created. So there is the SecOps tab, and this is the new stuff that is in there. And we have a couple of training sessions that we did yesterday, and there is one going on today as well. So if you want to learn more about our custom SDK, join that session. One of our finest engineers is giving that class. So learning directly from him, because that's his day-to-day workflow, would be super beneficial to anyone who wants to write their own SaltStack files. So notice, so once you upload the content, you now have the benchmark available. So this is the content that we are building. It's not completely ready for GA yet, so we're still going through the content, but we have some initial content developed to validate this works. And once you have this content, you can start to run an assessment. And the way we designed, the way we designed this is there is a single salt state file for assessment and remediation. When you run an assessment, it essentially runs in test is equal to true mode. So it doesn't make any changes to your system. So essentially it runs an equivalent of SQL select statement. So let's say you're investigating a specific configuration setting. So we would do a select statement, get it in. And when we switch over to the remediation, the way we designed it essentially goes and does the execute version of it. right? So that it goes and applies that salt state form. So when you run an assessment, everything is unknown because we don't know the state of that database at this point. So it's queued and it should complete in a minute. Yeah. And this is the beauty of Salt. The way it is designed, super flexible. For us to go in and now build the content and add a UI to it. It took a lot of engineering effort, but with the right ideas, we could build this on top of Salt Open. Okay, great. So we ran the assessment and the remediations as well. So everything is now uh, fixed. So let's put this in a bad state file where nothing is compliant. Everything is bad. Right? Everything is not compliant. So notice there are some failures now. So we ran. So let's go ahead and remediate. And as we go on, expect us to build more content for the technologies Salt support. So today we are starting with databases. We'll get into network devices. We'll get into web servers. Anything and everything that Salt can manage. We will build content for it. We'll ship the content for it. We'll support it. And if you have specific requests, let us know. And then we'll prioritize that content development on our content roadmap. So now everything is fixed, and now we are completely compliant. The last thing I want to talk about is performance improvements. We made some significant changes to SaltStack Enterprise 6.2 with respect to performance improvements. And before I can describe how we made these performance changes or pitch or enhancements to SaltStack Enterprise, I want to explain what used to happen today. It worked pretty well for small to medium enterprises. So if you're managing maybe 5 to 10,000 minions, it wasn't that big of a deal. But as we started to get into more and larger enterprises, some of the bottlenecks of our design started to come out. And so this is the high level design of how it used to work in previous versions of SaltStack Enterprise. So, and job return would come in on the master. The master would, so the sequence is 1 2 3 4. So the master would come, send that to the returner, and the returner would then send that event back to our SSE server. And until the SSE server acknowledges that event, essentially the master was blocked uh, on its end. So in worst cases, we were seeing the round trip time was around 10 seconds. So this was causing significant, timeouts and when we are landing into larger enterprises. What we did with SaltStack Enterprise 6.2, and this is something that is coming up, is we added a SQLite database layer between the returner and SSC server. So now the round trip time is less than 100 milliseconds. So you might be thinking, what does this mean to me? This is these charts look great and so on and so forth. But there's one more change we made in SaltStack or in Salt Open 2019 2.1, which allowed us to batch the event queue as well. So with the combination of the batching of events in Salt Open 2019 2.1 or 2.2 and SaltStack Enterprise 6.2, this is what you should expect. So we ran some benchmarks. So Salt masters are now 100x more responsive because of this change. So the master essentially never slows down, even though it's configured with SaltStack Enterprise. And our initial test, suggests that this allows us to support 20x more throughput. So before we could do, I believe, 33 events per second, and now we can go all the way to 600 events per second in terms of processing. It's a massive change in terms of performance, and we believe customers are going to love it when they start to play around with it. So next up is all the highlights from the Salt Open side. So, as you all know, we invest a lot of time and energy and engineering and support resources to make sure Salt lives up to the expectation the community has expected of Salt over the years. One of the changes that we are doing is just significant investment in a DevOps pipeline. We want to get to a point where we can release newer versions of Salt quicker. Our goal is 120-day release schedule, but expect us to go faster than that as well, because we are trying to tackle the barriers for release, and one of the biggest barriers for release is the release and testing process. I mean, we get a lot of pull requests from our community, then testing it, making sure it didn't break anything takes us a lot of time. So we invest a lot of time in the testing upfront, and once we know the test framework is in place, and if it runs for maybe 3 or 5 days and everything is good to go, all the tests are good, we feel comfortable releasing that release. And there are hundreds of new improvements that are coming up in Salt Open. One of the things that has been consistently asked for is the Salt loader, and it's super complicated. And we want to refactor the whole Salt loader in future releases of Salt Open. We don't have a timeline yet for the release, but this is something that we are going to actively investigate as we go along.
There's significant issues with the loader right now, especially around threading and mainly threading, and then just it's kind of slow and complicated. It's overly complicated if you look at the code. So we think it can be simplified.
And we'll get to the Q&A as well towards the end of it. Support for Tornado 5.x and 6.x is coming along, and something that we hear consistently is, can we run Salt Master on Windows, right? So that's something that we are actively investigating as well, and as well for AI. So these are some of the big features that are coming in to Salt Open. I talked about the symbiotic relationship between SaltStack Enterprise and Salt Open. So Delta Proxy is one of those projects that we plan to open source in the near future. And as we're building through the Delta Proxy project, some of the vendors came to us, like Arista, Juniper, and Cisco. And Delta Proxy was mostly for managing network devices. So these vendors came to us and said, you could actually run Minion natively on Arista devices. And this is something Mo talked about yesterday. So we will build extensions for some of these network devices out there, and once they are available, we will package, build, support them, and then they will be open source as well. And last but not the least is all the new innovation projects Tom talked about yesterday. The first one is POP, which stands for Plugin Oriented Programming. So asked Tom, how do I describe this? I went to engineers and asked them, how do I describe POP in a way everyone can understand? So the response was, we're writing POP to make Tom happy. so, but jokes aside, the Salt was always developed to be extensible and pluggable and so on. And part of the reason Salt has been so successful is because it has been super easy to extend. It's based on Python and so on. And what POP will do is essentially turbocharge that concept. So one of the challenges we run into is, if you are a developer and you want to contribute to Salt, let's say you want to write a new AWS library or an Azure library, for those changes to make into official Salt releases could take 6 to 9 months, right? So the distribution of your changes can take a long time to fix. So instead, the goal of Pop is you could just write your own plugin, which just does that one thing that you want it to do, and then you would distribute through pip, and users could just do a pip install your library or your plugin, and you're good to go. You don't have to understand Salt in its entirety to just make a simple change that you feel super comfortable making that change. So, so once you talk about Pop, the next is item. Again, I asked the team, how do I explain item to somebody who has not understood item? Make Tom happy. That same answer comes back every time. Anyways, so item is extension of the Salt State Engine. The Salt State Engine is super complex. So imagine a world where the State Engine is essentially a plugin completely extracted out. So if you want to extend the Salt State Engine, you can quickly do it and move on from there. So the item is based on Pop. So expect us to make some investments there and simplify the ability for anyone to come in and contribute code to Salt. Heist is one of the coolest features, at least from my perspective. The name may not make sense, but it essentially allows you to do dissolvable agents across the infrastructure. So if you run into a scenario where you want to manage systems without installing Salt, is your answer. So what Heist allows you to do is completely package Salt in its entirety in a dissolvable agent, and it runs up there. And you can run commands on it, and as soon as it's done with its thing, it exits out and removes all the traces of its existence. Super cool. We expect to support Windows as well with Heist, so you should be able to manage a wide variety of systems agentless with Heist in the near future. And last but not the least is Umbra, which is the AI project which listens into your Salt event bus and tries to understand any anomalies that are happening within your infrastructure. So that's all we had. If you want to try out the pre-release versions, there is go ahead and sign up to, this URL and let us know, and we'll send you the pre-release versions of all the features that we demonstrated. And we also have our UX team in-house at SaltConf at 250A. So if you are already a SaltStack enterprise customer, go visit them, and they'll be happy to take your feedback and roll it into the product in the future releases. So with that, we'll open up for Q&A. Go ahead.
I'm actually going to come over to the people asking questions and let you speak into the mic so it can get on video.
Hi. When you're doing your vulnerability remediation, does it account for things like, so I work in the data layer, right? So I may have a cluster of MySQL servers. I can't bring all those servers down at the same time. It has to be done, you have to move through that process. Is that accounting for that? Are you rebooting those servers when you're doing that? How are you handling kernel vulnerabilities as part of this?
That's a great question.
See where I'm going with that? Thanks.
So that's a great question. We are not restarting the systems yet. We'll get there to the point where we can restart it, but you can orchestrate a very complex workflow where you could scan the systems, find the vulnerabilities within SaltStack Enterprise and SaltStack Protect. So when we started off this project, what we did is we built our own vulnerability database to scan for these common vulnerabilities. We're starting off with operating system vulnerabilities, and our goal is to extend it to other applications as we go along. But we are not restarting systems yet, but expect us to do that in future releases as well. So we'll allow you to pick and choose what you want to do. Do you want to install the patch, restart the MySQL server, and then bring it up, and then also tie it eventually to maybe Salt reactors and beacons as well to make sure, well, they were restarted and they came up, and the monitor and the beacon came up and said, yes, it is up and running. Any other questions?
Hi, are there any snapshotting features on the roadmap, like integrated for snapshotting before applying updates? And then are there any planned rollback features in the future?
So yes, it is within our medium to long term roadmap. So when we say short term, it's 0 to 3 months. So it's not on the 0 to 3 months roadmap, but medium 6 to 12 months. It's something we are actively considering to add into the roadmap, because we are already making the changes. So also we know what we changed. So it's so it's essentially doing the negative of what we changed. So it does require some engineering effort on the enterprise side to make it all work. But yes, this is all on the medium to long term roadmap. Any other question?
So my question is regarding POP. So I guess in the future, SaltStack will be based on POP. Am I correct with that, or?
Stretch, but I'll let Daniel.
Yeah, so right now we're not trying to push pop into Salt, the Salt code base. We're trying to pull things out of the Salt code base and leverage pop there. Long term, ideally, yes, but we're not at the point of actually actively trying to do that now. Pop is still a brand new initiative, so we're gonna try to let it get some traction, work out the bugs, make sure that we like it, make sure everything's working right, and then see in the future if and when it does make sense to pull it into Salt.
We heard in previous discussions that, like you just said, we're trying to pull current things out of Salt into Pop. What was it? I may have misheard previously, but is there a cloud-based module that's already been migrated to Pop or something like that? Just an example of how it's being used currently?
Yeah, so the cloud working group is working on a version of Salt Cloud that lives outside of Salt that's leveraging Pop and Heist, or Pop and Item, sorry. And Heist is, you can think of Heist as Salt SSH pulled out of Salt. Any other questions?
Okay.
One more.
I was just wondering if Umbra was fully integrated into SaltStack Enterprise yet.
Not yet. But,
Okay.
So Umbra started about. So the Umbra project started about 3 to 6 months ago. Our goal is with Umbra to leverage this for risk analysis. So when we are doing vulnerability scanning, using artificial intelligence to understand which vulnerabilities are more severe compared to others. Because if you are looking at hundreds of thousands of vulnerabilities, you want some level of risk prioritization for you, right? So we are hoping eventually Umbra will help us with that, to provide us with the context to make that kind of decision making in the future in SaltStack Enterprise. Any other questions? I think that's a wrap. Well, thank you all for joining. Again, if you want, the pre-release versions, it's up on there. And if you want to understand more about SaltStack Protect, there is a session right after this one. Please join to understand more. Thank you.